Ladies and gentlemen, the Korea-U.S. policy dialogue will start shortly, so please take your seats. Hello everyone, welcome to the day 2 of the Korea-U.S. policy dialogue towards carbon neutrality. I'm Hee-Sung Kim from KDI School. In case you missed the day 1, the policy dialogue hosted by KDI School shares the results of the Korea-U.S. collaborative research every year on a timely topic. You can find the program if you scan the QR in the upper right corner of your name tag. Simultaneous interpretation is being provided with the receiver on your table. This event is being broadcast live on KDI School YouTube channel. Thank you again on and offline participants for your interest and participation. Now let us begin today's session, the third session of the event on energy and society. Our first speaker for today is Dr. Nina Kelsey, Associate Professor at George Washington University. Her research examines the dynamics of interest in environmental policymaking, exploring how they evolve and influence policy at various levels. She will be virtually joined by Dr. In-Hwan Ko, Assistant Professor of Environmental Policy at the University of Nevada, Reno. His work focuses on the political economy of climate change, energy and environmental politics, and transnational environmental cooperation. They will now start share their insights on local greenhouse gas reduction policy drivers in Korea and the U.S. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kelsey and Dr. Ko.
All right. Am I being picked up well? Okay, so thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here in Korea and to be attending this really excellent research program. I so much enjoyed the presentations yesterday, and I'm looking forward to more of the same today. Now, many of the presentations so far have been building on kind of complex modeling and quantitative analysis, drawing on economics, statistics, big data, and I want to take you now in a completely different direction, into the world of political science and case studies. This is a joint research project in which I have been researching city-level climate policy in the United States, and my co-author, Dr. In-Hwan Ko, has been researching city-level climate policy in Korea, with the goal of comparing and contrasting our findings and seeing what we can learn from that analysis. So I really appreciate folks here being willing to accommodate the hybrid presentation style. I am going to start off by explaining the theoretical background to the project and my findings in the US, and then I'll hand off to Dr. Ko for him to discuss his findings specific to the Korean context, and then wrap up by telling you what we think we can learn in terms of policy implications and what our next steps are going to be. So the motivation for this research project is this, oops, I do need to advance the slide, that will help, is this basic research question. What drives cities, counties, and comparable small subnational jurisdictions to engage in stringent unilateral climate policy? And to just define our terms a little bit, by stringent I mean policies that pursue carbon reduction at levels or speeds exceeding what those jurisdictions are required to do under broader national or state requirements. So this would include jurisdictions that do things like setting GHG reduction targets or renewable energy targets that exceed what's required under state or national law, or jurisdictions that commit to moving faster on such targets than what's required under contextual law. And when I say unilateral, I mean that cities are doing this without any way of guaranteeing that other cities around the world will do the same thing. So essentially I'm asking, and we're asking, why do local jurisdictions do more than they have to do without being certain that other jurisdictions will do the same? Why is this a puzzle? Empirically, it's a puzzle because some cities do it and some cities don't. And since we think it's good behavior, it's good when more jurisdictions are pushing as hard as they can. We'd like to learn what causes it, because this might help elicit more of that behavior. Theoretically, it's a puzzle because pursuing these policies is generally costly, at least in the short term. And that means cities that do this are risking absorbing those costs without being sure that they will get a commensurate payoff in terms of global climate change mitigation. If you're coming from a political science or an economics background, that looks like a classic tragedy of the commons setup, where we would often expect jurisdictions might try to free ride. In other words, doing as little as they can, hoping others will do more, because either they're worried that they will be taken advantage of by jurisdictions that want others to do more, or they just want to get out of doing as much as they can. On a theoretical level, there are sort of three general reasons why we might imagine that cities would do this potentially somewhat counterintuitive thing. First, and sort of simplest, maybe it's just outside influence. Maybe they're being told to do it by some outside power or incentivized to do it. Second, in more keeping with kind of classical environmental activist ideas, maybe they're doing it because of altruistic or ideological reasons. Maybe it's the classical economics folks are wrong, and people just do things that are not in their direct personal interests because they really think it's the right thing to do. And finally, maybe it is actually about economic rationality, and cities just think that setting these goals will yield private benefits like industry growth, city branding, etc. Now, policy-wise, there are really different policy implications for these different ideas, right? If we think city action is driven by altruism, that suggests that if we want to get more of it, we would need to focus on things like sort of winning hearts and minds strategies, getting people ideologically and altruistically motivated. On the other hand, if we think that city action is driven more by the desire to capture private gains or do instrumental things, like create new industries, then that tells us we should be focusing on things like how do we tailor policy interventions to local resource and industry profiles. And we might expect different behavior from these different motivations as well. And we should care about the answers to those kinds of questions because cities are increasingly a huge locus of both policy making and policy implementation in the climate world. And understanding what motivates them to choose to excel in these areas, to push harder than they have to, allows us to derive lessons for how we might accelerate climate policy in this important level of governance. So this work is actually building on some prior research using this framework that I have done looking at the same questions in Sweden and Portugal. And I want to just briefly touch on that because it kind of gives a bit of a basis for additional comparison. Interestingly, what I found in those two countries is that they had nationally distinct stories. That is, cities in Sweden tend to cite the same reasons for pursuing climate policy as each other. The story I get from city officials is very similar from city to city. And the same is true of Portugal, but with different reasons. So the story that I was consistently getting from Swedish officials is different from the story that I was consistently getting from Portuguese officials. In Sweden, it was a story of economic diplomacy at the city level. So by being first movers in stringent climate policy making, cities could develop global city brands around that leadership that really intertwine their community identity with a kind of economic paradiplomacy. So for instance, one of the cities that I interviewed in Sweden, the mayor said, hey, come a little bit early, you can sit in on us, we're welcoming a delegation from South Africa to come see how our city is doing what it's doing. And this was a city of 60,000 people, so this was a kind of international attention that they might not get in any other way. In Portugal, on the other hand, it's a story of gaining leverage over higher level policymaking. Portuguese cities are not particularly important politically in the grand scheme of things. And by setting these stringent city-level GHG reduction targets, cities could actually kind of get a seat at the table in EU policymaking that they wouldn't normally have done. So that would allow them to pursue local priorities that might otherwise get sidelined. And meanwhile, they are also doing a lot to embed environmental norms through strong educational programs, literally in their elementary schools, their high schools, and so forth. So in these two jurisdictions, in both of them, city GHG reduction policy stems from kind of potent combinations of both identity and ideas stuff with locally specific instrumental motivations. Thus far, we've looked at 2 jurisdictions in Korea and 3 in the United States. It's not practically possible for us to do a random sample, but our overarching goal, especially in the United States, where there's a lot of within-country variation in state context, is to kind of maximize the spread of cities that we're looking at across U.S. regions and contexts. So these first three cities are in the Midwest, the South, and the Southwest, which are very different regional areas in the United States. And along those lines, two things that we would emphasize about the comparison between Korea and the US here are that while both countries have some variation at the city level in terms of city governance structure and city industrial profile, in Korea there really is this shared overarching policy context in terms of the national carbon reduction mandate. So as a side note, that means that what constitutes what we're considering a success case or a particularly aggressive policy mover in the Korean context is not so much the existence of carbon reduction policy, because that is kind of required, but rather whether jurisdictions have chosen to exceed the national requirements, for instance, through earlier reduction timelines than they otherwise are required to pursue. In the US, there is no such overarching policy baseline, and cities exist in widely varied political and economic contexts at the state level. Second, cities in Korea broadly lack as much revenue generating power as tends to be located in cities in the United States. And that means that successful cases in Korea need to be able to draw on other resources, which Dr. Ko will talk about. This is, as I say, not as true in the United States, where cities often do have some level of local revenue generating power. So what have I learned so far from research in the US? I was genuinely surprised that so far ideological and altruistic motivations have loomed larger in the stories told by US city officials than in Sweden, Portugal, or my understanding from Dr. Ko is in Korea. US city leaders in the cities we've looked at so far just really consistently emphasize a driving motivation as the sort of need to do what's right for future generations and the world. And these motivations are typically embedded in coalitions of broad concern from citizen voters. So they talk about citizen demand for these policies, led by activist mayors and city council members that are passionate about climate policy and really want to lead forward on that for personal for reasons based on their personal understanding and beliefs about the world. I genuinely thought I would see more instrumental motivations, but so far that just hasn't been something that US leaders have talked about a lot. One very interesting sort of exception that I did see was something that I'm calling apocalyptic altruism. And what I mean by that is, I gave you this theoretical framing about how, maybe it's not in cities' best interest to be the leaders, maybe they should try to free ride. Towards the end of my interviews, I often pose that explicitly to city policymakers and say, well, do you think about it that way? And a really good example of a response was from the mayor of St. Petersburg, who said, look, we're going to be underwater if other cities don't come through on this. So it's not useful for us to try to free ride. We just have to do our best and hope that other people will do their best, and that will benefit us in the long term. Another surprise to me was that city officials didn't bring up the withdrawal from the Paris Agreement as a significant motivating factor. That was a little surprising to me because timing-wise, we did see a lot of cities make those commitments right after that as part of the We Are Still In movement. So that was kind of interesting to me. But I do think it may be a background factor just in terms of why ideological motivations and sort of need to do what's right motivations are so strong in the US cities. I do want to note we should always be wary that officials might be spinning the truth a little bit. But in prior research projects, officials have been happy to discuss instrumental motivations and sort of critical events and why they did things. So I don't have any strong reason to think that city officials in the US would not be willing to. Generally speaking, I found what they had to say fairly credible. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Ko to talk about Korea and then take us home.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kelsey. And before I start, thank you very much for accommodating this hybrid format from KDI School and their staffs. And also thank you very much for esteemed speakers and participants of this conference to bearing with me for that hybrid matter. So as Dr. Kelsey mentioned, I studied Gwangju and Daegu, two cities. And then not only including those two cities, but all of the cities are facing the same situation, which is that in 2021, the government has enacted the Carbon Neutrality Act or Framework Act so that all these cities are having the mandate to have their own version of carbon neutrality ordinance. So in terms of the existence of that ordinance, it may not explain the variation in pace and stringency of the urban unilateral climate action. And the second point here, strong private gains motivations also point to the similarities between these two cities are having. For example, Daegu and Gwangju have very strong interest in translating their carbon actions into promoting industry. So for instance, Daegu had a very successful historical case of pitching into the water issues in their local context, and therefore hosting a water global forum, and then therefore hosting a lot of industry opportunities in their city. So there are private gain motivations, but something that might differ across these two cities are ideological motivations. That is, we found that there are strong local knowledge brokers, which means professors, researchers that are personally and ideologically interested in climate issues for a long time. And then in these two cities, they provided a great deal of not only the financial resources by pulling out from different local and global networks, but also providing them a lot of expertise. So that one of the obstacles that Korean cities would have is the rotation policy, where the government officials may have to move to different departments so that the knowledge or the experience of policymaking in the realm of climate change may not be accumulating over time. But these knowledge brokers, be their researchers and professors, may provide every new hired or every new designated city officials and then help them carry out and draft the climate policy. So this might be very particularly interesting in these two cases. So we're interested in looking at the other cities and see if they have the similar opportunity or prestige or not. And finally, the importance of political leadership and citizen engagement seem to vary across these two cities. Mostly Daegu is led by the then mayor, and then the then mayor was pretty much interested in climate change personally. So he himself was the chair of all local governments' climate actions. But Gwangju is more citizen engagement driven, and then it's seen by a lot of citizen councils and committees and conferences before the enactment of their carbon neutrality goal. So this points to the fact that Gwangju has 2045 carbon neutrality deadline, which is quite earlier than what's mandated by the government act, but the Daegu just simply follows the 2050, which is the general guideline for all the local cities. So moving on to pointing to some interesting similarities and differences. As Dr. Kelsey mentioned, US motivations appear to be significantly more influenced by ideological motivations, or Dr. Kelsey's interesting coinment, the apocalyptic altruism, which was not found in all the Korean cases that I found. Also, in terms of setting the goal, US and Korean cities had high levels of consensus around just having the goal and signifying the importance of having the carbon neutrality target by a certain amount of time. But what's happening after the target is set should be about how to actually carry out those goals. And then those means and methods, people will have much more debate around those means and implementation tools. So that's another point that we have found as a similarity. Also, very interesting similarity is the presence of knowledge holders and brokers. I'm talking about professors, to reiterate, and researchers. And most importantly, these cities must have the forum, or at least universities, research centers, institutes where these knowledge brokers can get a job and then do a long-term policy studies for the policymakers. So this should help motivate policymaking and provide continuity mechanisms, like I talked about regarding the rotation policy in Korea, for priorities and expertise across administrations. And I want to emphasize that this finding is pretty much coinciding with the Berry and Haddad 2023 publication, Urban Affairs Review, that looked at several cities that made carbon neutrality goal, even though in the US context it's not mandated for all these cities to have such target. But when these researchers looked at those who were ambitious in their targets, they did have universities and expert NGOs and those policy institutes, so-called think tanks in their cities, which would do the same function that we found in our two case studies. So the policy implication is that supporting decentralized nodes of climate policy expertise is very important, and especially given the Korean context where the research opportunities and learning opportunities are mostly focused on a specific area, not to mention metropolitan areas, it may be very important for non-metropolitan cities to have or access to such opportunities so that they can raise and educate future educators and possibly experts and researchers to play the same function. And also, since the GHG target setting itself shows high levels of consensus, interventions will likely to be happening upstream and downstream specific policymaking decisions. Also, drivers of city level action are localized, which means that we need to understand the city's historical and political context over a long time, so that we need to understand the very heterogeneous drivers of city level action, and it's hardly generalizable. However, should there be any generalizable points across these different cities, in our case, US and Korea, there should be some generalizable lessons learned to carry out and then provide some policy implications to those policymakers. And finally, to reiterate, conflicts are more likely not around the target, but all in the methods. So policy entrepreneurs should focus on identifying where the resistance is likely to happen in terms of setting not the target itself, but more on to the next steps after the target has been made. Our next steps, I will conclude by saying that we need some additional research, especially expanding regional variation in the US and adding some negative comparative cases in US and Korea. Gwangju and Daegu can largely be said as successful cases in both carrying out the plans and also having some ambitious plans, although in terms of the target deadline, they had a different points. So we will navigate that and then also find if the other cities that are not that much successful would not have the factors such as knowledge broker in their cities. So that explains the difference across these two cities and the other negative cases. And we will continue synthetic analysis driving some comparative findings between US and Korea, which means that we might have to do some more follow-up interviews in the future. And also we may, based on those new findings, we may further develop policy implications to carry out. Thank you very much. This ends my presentation.
Thank you for your presentation, Professor Kelsey and Professor Ko. Our second speaker is Dr. James Hyungwon Kim, an energy economist and policy researcher at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. With a focus on clean energy market policy, he brings a wealth of domestic and international experience, including roles at the United Nations Environmental Program. Today, he will look into renewable battery hybrid power plants in congested electricity markets, implications for plant configuration. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Kim.
Okay, so sorry for the long title, by the way. I figure this is one of the longest titles you have seen. So, renewable battery hybrid power plants in congested electricity markets, implications. Yeah, so let's start with that. I'm going to explain what does that mean, renewable battery hybrid power plants in congested electricity markets, how it impacts on the plant configuration. And of course, this is a study done by the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab with our team members, as you see here in the Energy Markets and Policy Department. So let's begin. I'm going to show some of the backgrounds on the electricity markets in the US and how does this hybrid is being a trend in the electricity market and how does it integrate with the congested transmission line. So let's look at this chart. This has been the chart for the last 15 years in the US, and how much and what are the resource types of the energy that are integrated in the electricity market in the US. And as you can see, the solar and wind, whether it's utility scale or distributed scale, those are the main factors of the new generation capacity in the US for the last 15 years. And the trend is growing, as you can see here. The orange colors are the solar, and the blue is wind. So this has been in the past. And how about the future? So this is a crystal ball that we have, which calls the interconnection queue, that in the next 3, 5, 7 years, type of the resources will be integrated in the electricity market in the US. And as you can see on the far left side, the solar has been dominating interconnection queue resource in the US, meaning for the next 5, 7 years, the solar will be the dominating factor of the new generation resources. And also the energy storage. You can see the very high big jump in the 3 years. That means probably like from 5 years ago or something, there has been a lot of interest in Texas and California to integrate energy storage, and we'll see how does it look like. And also the gas and nuclear is kind of like a dying. Gas is dying. I mean, gas has been increasing, but in the decreasing factor. And also the nuclear has been 0 for the last 10 years, and the coal is almost 0, others 0. So meaning the solar, wind, and energy storage in recent years are the dominating factor in the coming resources. And as you can see here, the hybrid, when I talk about hybrid, is a combination of the technology in the same point of interconnection, meaning in the same gateway to be connected to the electricity market, and whether those are technology of like a solar plus energy storage or wind plus energy. I'm going to call it as a hybrid, and there are different types of the co-located hybrid in terms of the hybrid resources. That, as you can see here. So this is a definition of the hybrid, a combination of the technology, but in this study is mostly of the solar plus energy storage or wind plus energy storage. So with that said, what does it matter? Because the hybrid plants has been a dominating form of the energy integration for the last few years. As you can see here, the interconnection queue, that the hybrid comprise more than 50% of the active storage capacity that will be integrated, and 48% of the solar and 8% of the wind has been a hybrid resource form. So many people think that, if there's a solar or wind, it's a standalone solar or wind. No, it is not. More than half of the time that it has been the case of the hybrid, meaning combination of the technology. So why does it matter? And why does it have to be with the electricity market? Because the solar and the wind integration in the US is a locality, meaning when you think about the solar and wind has been a dominating factor in the US, you think easily, they're across the US, on average, everywhere there's a solar and wind. No, it is not. Because the solar has been more in the California, as you can see in the west, or Texas, as you see in the right, in the south, or the right side of the Florida or eastern coast. That's where the solars are integrated. How about wind? Wind has been in the middle of the area where the wind is blowing, of course, like Kansas, Oklahoma, or Nebraska, in the middle of the center of the US, and there has been a lot of wind. As you can see, the other part of the US has been really sparse of the wind integration. So I might say the solar and the wind, on average, the US has been a dominating factor of the new generation capacity. However, it has been a localized effect. And what does it with the electricity market? This is the price of the volatility of the electricity market as a snapshot in 2021. So the stronger the color is, there's a frequency of the negative LMPs or the price volatility, meaning a lot of the integration of the wind and solar has been volatile, making volatile of the electricity market price and electricity market outcomes. Why? Because the solar and wind are the intermittent generation assets, meaning there is a sun, then there can be solar generation, but nobody knows what's going to be happening to the sun in the sky. For the next 5 minutes, how do you know where this clouds is coming in? Or the next 5 days, how can you be so sure that the wind is blowing? Because it's a natural-based resources, it is based on the natural circumstances, and it's become variable. When there's a sun, there's a generation. When there's a cloud, there's no generation. So meaning it makes a volatile of the electricity market outcome. As you can see here, the wind is focused on the central side, and the volatility of the focus on the central side too. And what does that do? Again, is this is the price temperature map of the U.S. So as you can see, the SPP in the middle side, or ORCA market in the downside, or the KAISO market in the left side, where there's a lot of sun integrated, the price is distributed in the different areas in a different scale. Meaning, if you have a more generation asset of the renewable energy, then the price tends to go down. And if you are the receivers of those generated energies, then your price tends to go up. So as you can see here, like ORCA market on the western side, the price is almost like a negative boundary, meaning on average your price is low. Is why? Because many of the ORCA markets, like on the western side or the southern side, a lot of wind is integrated. So meaning there is a lot of wind is integrated, then the electricity price in the U.S. is determined by the marginal resource. So there is a lot of education going on, but this is probably an important part to mention why this is matters. So the marginal cost determines the electricity price in the U.S., and the electricity price in the U.S. as distributed in the thousands of the nodes in the in different regions. For example, Korea has a unilateral price, meaning entire Korea Peninsula has usually having a single price, except some of the Jeju Island, or why not? But the U.S., if you are in different location, you tend to have a different prices based on the topology of the electricity market and the power systems connected by the transmission line. So that if the transmission line cannot really deliver the cheap energy from the western side of the Texas, for example, generated by the wind, where the marginal cost is zero, then the price on that area is low. However, if the transmission line where the flows the energy from one area to the other, like on highway, if the transmission line is congested, meaning it's a full capacity, so it cannot really deliver additional energy, then if you're in Houston or Austin, that needs a lot of energy. However, the energy cannot flow into the area, then the energy price on that area in the city is going up. So there is a price difference is happening because of the transmission line congestion. And why it matters? Because for the last 20 years, while as you can see, the renewable integration is getting higher and higher, and as you know, like you cannot really build the wind power plants right next to Seoul or right next to Houston. It has to be in the remote area. So must be a transmission line to connect those two areas where the cheap energy resources are generated and where those are consumed. However, for the last 20 years, for many different reasons, that's going to be another presentation, we couldn't really build a long-range or long-distance transmission line, especially the interstate. So the high transmission value is observed in many regions, so this is what we're targeting to build. However, because of the transmission line capacity is constrained, meaning lagged, to deliver the renewable energy resources, there is a transmission line congestion is happening, and the price differences is happening, and that's why we want to figure out what are the interplays between those renewable assets, especially in the form of the hybrid and the transmission line congestion. So for the last 3 years, the electricity, the Energy Markets and Policy Department and Berkeley National have been a lot of studies on the hybrid, meaning the energy storage plus renewables. And there has been a lot of findings that we have been trying to figure out. And this study is particularly on the two aspects. One is configuration choices of the hybrid, and the two is with this topology, with this highly congested electricity market because of the renewable energy. But as a renewable energy producer in the form of the hybrid, how do they want to integrate in the market, and how do they want to participate in the market? So the importance of this, considering the transmission line constraint, has been lacked, meaning many studies ignore the transmission constraint in the study of the VRE, the variable renewable energies and the storage. And the congested regions, as I explained, by the restrict electricity flow, and because of the transmission line constraint, especially because of the renewable energy, it affects the renewable energy. Meaning, if you have wind power plants that are located in the west of the Texas, and if you have wind power plant, you tend to cluster because there are areas that are having more the wind than the other areas. So those wind power plants tend to cluster, and those areas tend to have a lower price because you are the generator with a marginal cost zero, meaning as long as you have wind, you don't really need the fossil fuels. You don't need the gas. You just need the wind. So the marginal cost is almost zero, and the price is low, as you could see in the map in the previous slide. That affects your revenue. Meaning, if you are the wind power plants, then you want to have more wind as a market integrator and a policy regulators. But if there is more wind, then the price is going down, and the price is going down because of the transmission line constraint. So there is a dynamics of that interplay. And so in this study, we divided those congested regions in the two areas. One is undersupply, the other one is oversupply. So when there is an oversupply, of course, the price is going down. And if the price is going down, then the value of the wind or solar or energy storage plants is going down. But if you're in the load pockets where the load is higher than the supply, then the price is going up. So those are the two areas defined by the transmission line. Transmission line dividing the area where the supply is happening, when the consumption is happening, supply is happening, the price is low and the more volatile, and the load pockets where the energy is supposed to be delivered. However, the highway is too small so that it's not delivered, the energy price is high. And the hybrid plants proposed as a solution to address this value decline. So meaning if you have wind power plants, then you're gonna get a rest revenue because of yourself, because you are the energy generator. However, if you are attaching the energy storage, the one solution you can have is increasing the value because of the energy storage. So what do I mean by that? Energy storage is what it necessarily do is store the energy and dispatch the energy. And when do you want to store the energy? When the energy price is cheap. You don't have to sell it right now. When do you want to dispatch those energies? Then you want to find the time of the day or hour of the day that when the energy price is higher. Meaning, when you have an energy storage, then as an energy producer, you have an opportunity to arbitrage. You can store the energy when the price is low, and you can sell this energy when the energy price is high. So in this study, with this in mind, we want to understand the influence of the hybrid configuration. What kind of hybrid, what kind of energy storage plus solar or energy plus of the wind that you want to have to increase your value in these congested regions. And the congested regions is getting higher because of renewables, so it's kind of like a circulation point. And the importance is that inside of these configuration choices and market policy design, how do you want to design the markets and the power systems, also the energy system models. So when you're a planner of the electricity market and power system, you tend to think about, like on average, you want to think about like a solar. What kind of the form of the solar? What kind of form of the wind that you want to have? But if you think about the renewable energy future, especially we couldn't really build the energy transmission lines for the last 20 years in the US, then you have to think a little bit differently. Depends on the region, depends on the area, depends on the congested pattern. You want to think about different configurations of the hybrid, different configurations of the energy storage in your planning, in your models, and your policy choices. As renewable energy penetration grows, as I explained, the congestion might increase and making more difficult and making more pivotal for the future planning by considering those hybrid configuration choices based on the types of the congestion. And given the literature, yes, as I said, there's no study has been done this for it. So methodology, I'll probably skip this very quickly, but however, you can ask questions later. So this is we use a lot of data, and we have a methodology that having a wind solar data resources and how to integrate those profiles and choose the congestion regions based on the expert research and types of the congested regions. And the bottom, the low centers, where there's a more demand than the supply, and the very rich areas where the supply is higher than the demand, especially for the renewable energy. The hybrid dispatch is a pi hybrid model that's developed in-house to calculate and estimate those hybrid profiles and factors considered. A lot of factors are considered, as storage capacity, location of prices, and capacity values, and all that. And the hybrid energy value is calculated based on the real-time market prices of this that specific area times the profile from the hybrid as in energy plus storage, plus solar or wind. And that was the energy value. And also, as your power plant in the US, you generally have a capacity value. And to calculate the capacity value, we tend to focus on the critical times of the year. So 8760 hours is the time of the hours of the year, and we chose the highest 100 net load hours where the load or demand is the highest across the years. And we want to see how those capacity contribution is happening based on the hybrid configuration choices. And here is the generalized configuration choices that we based upon this study. So with that methodology, let's get into that. But I'll just like solve one question, like how do you know those hybrid dispatch profile if you modeled it and profiled it based on your calculation? Is it similar to the real hybrid dispatch? The answer is yes. We had done a study a while ago. We collected real data, hourly, sometimes 5-minute level data from the multiple projects in the US. We compared that result based on our simulated dispatch and the real-time data, the real dispatch data, that we found that consistency. So we have a pretty confidence in our methodology, and we also improved our methodology, again, from the real data collected from those real developers of the energy storage and the hybrids. So the results. I'll probably go into some of the zest without explaining too much details. So this is the graph. Based on the duration of the energy storage, based on like a 0 is no storage attached, and the duration is increased, meaning you have like, I don't know, in Korean it's 장주기 storage. So your duration is increased as an energy storage, meaning you have more hours to dispatch your energy. So the dark gray is a load center, and the light gray is a very rich area, meaning you have more supply. So when you see this result, you can see some of the interesting findings. As soon as you have become 1 from 0, meaning no energy storage, to energy storage as a hybrid, then your value or energy revenue in that area, regardless of your location type by the congestion, is increased a lot. And how much does it increase, and how long, how that increase trend is maintained is until 4 hours, meaning after 4 hours of the duration, your value increase in the energy market is kind of capped. So this is by the 4-hour duration storage. So this is kind of interesting because the 2-hour, 4-hour is becoming kind of norm, but the 2-hour or 1-hour energy storage in the electricity market so far in the US from the real data has been a norm, meaning you're supposed to have a less duration or shorter duration is considered optimal. However, if you locate it in a more congested area, you probably need double the duration of your energy storage. And so the 4-hour duration is the cap. Don't we need longer than 4-hour duration storage? I'll come back to that. But meaning like compared to the average storage, meaning like without considering the transmission line congestion, your duration is supposed to be shorter. However, if you consider the congested market, especially when you're located in the load center area, your duration until 4-hour duration is helpful to you. And how does it meaning for the quality of the energy storage? So there are a lot of definitions of determining the quality of the energy storage. However, this is a degradation, meaning so energy storage is a chemical product, and as your chemical products discharge and charge the energy, you have a degradation, meaning you have a reduction of the energy efficiency of the in and out of the energy. So the lower degradation is better. So as I mentioned, the 4-hour energy storage duration is kind of capped of this energy value. So comparing is 4-hour energy value to the 1-hour energy value. This is how much incremental it can get based on the degradation. So the lighter gray is a low degradation, meaning your quality of energy storage is better. So if you have a higher quality of energy storage with a lower degradation rate, then your value increase, whether in a rich or low center area, is quite higher than the higher degradation energy storage, meaning especially when you're in congested area, if you have a better energy storage quality, then your value gain is higher, which is helpful for the energy storage and the hybrid developers to recoup their revenue. So they have a more motivation incentive to install more of the hybrid form of the renewable energy storage, renewable and the energy storage, so we can have a higher renewable integration. So that's kind of the circuit line here. And the grid charging, of course, when you can charge from the grid is helpful to you. So it has been a world of energy. So meaning you provide energy, then you gain a value. So how about capacity? Capacity is something considered in different markets in different ways. So we wanted to find some of the consistent approach. So we want to focus on the top 100 net load hours translate into the capacity factor, meaning top 100 net load hours, it can be translated into something like your energy market or power system is in the most dire time. You have the highest demand in the hot summer days. You have a highest demand in the cold winter times, and how much capacity those hybrid power plants contribute to the system. So as you can see here, like there are differences between the solar on the left side and the right side of the wind, but the zest is the solar hybrid can attain 90% of the capacity factor with a 4-hour duration, storage duration. However, if you're wind power plants, then you need 8 hours of the duration of the storage to reach to the same level of the 90% of the capacity factor. So meaning, if you are the system operator, then you need the most capacity contribution from the energy resources that you have in the market. The top 100 net load hours represent those dire times. And if you are the hybrid power plants with a solar, then you just need a 4-hour energy storage, duration energy storage. However, if you're wind, especially, is also another topic, but Inflation Reduction Act encouraged the hybrid power plants with the wind and energy storage. So if you are the developers of energy wind plus energy storage, and if you're a power market system operator, if you want to have a higher contribution of those wind power plants plus energy storage, and if you want to have a higher capacity factor contribution, then you need to consider, you must consider longer duration energy storage, at least for the 8-hour for the wind hybrid power plants. And why 90% of the capacity factor is important? Because some of the markets, especially in the CAISO and some of the markets, their definition, pseudo definition of the capacity credit is a 90% of the effective load carrying capacity of those selected generation assets. So this is more technical, but if you're wind power plants, especially in the dire time, you need a longer duration storage, such as 8 hours. And overall, solar has higher capacity value than the wind. In many different reasons, is more aligned with the profile and the price scheme, especially the dot curve, as Dr. Brown mentioned yesterday. So for some of the technical reasons, solar has a higher capacity than the wind and is capped by the certain duration end. So, with those results in mind, what are the points of the discussion? So highly congested regions demonstrate distinct value profiles for the hybrid plants. So when you consider just without congestion, just a normal in electricity market, 2-hour duration is enough. But when you think about the congested areas, 4-hour is probably necessary. If you think about the higher capacity factor necessary when the system is in dire with the highest net load times, then you need a longer duration. And also the quality of the battery, it matters. If you have a lower degradation of the energy storage, it increases the value of the energy storage higher. And also, we just skipped that very briefly, but if you can charge from the grid, then you can gain also higher value. And what does that all that means? Like meaning, we want to think about the 2 points, 2 sides of the aspect. One is the developer side. We want to have a higher solar and wind and clean energy resource integration as a goal of the U.S. government. However, as we saw, those higher renewable integration kind of self-cannibalize their revenue because they are these zero marginal cost resources, and they have a less revenue, so they are getting less motivated to install their clean energies. So we want to improve their revenue sources. We want to improve their incentives, and especially with the congested market because of the integrated renewable energy resources. We want to have a new set of the plans. We need to have a new set of the configuration of the hybrid. We want to have a better understanding. And if you are the system operator, then you want to have the most of the capacity contribution from the energy resources when the things are dire. So that's why we wanted to look at the capacity values, real capacity factors, and those capacity factor matters. Then you need a longer duration storage, especially with the wind hybrid plants, where it is encouraged by the recent Inflation Reduction Act. For the technical reasons, I'm happy to answer that in the questions. So major takeaways. Hybrid plants in congested regions are present of the spectrum of the value based on their configuration and by the other conditions. So the energy-only markets and the capacity-only markets, when you consider the congested network, you need to have a different set of the hybrid configuration compared to the other studies and other realities that without considering the congested network. So implication for the future, the developers, energy planners, and the policymakers must think about this aspect. They cannot really think about the average aspect. When you have a 0 and 100 and average 50, it doesn't mean anything. And especially when the congested network of the electricity market is happening by the renewable energies, then we also need to think about those interplays. So why this matters? Because it kind of like provided some of the R&D reasonings and perspective for the Department of Energy. So if they want to develop some of the longer energy duration storage, there are a lot of money pouring in to developing the longer energy duration storage. And this type of study become a basis for those reasonings. And we also want to develop some of the higher quality energy storage. And as you saw, the lower degradation will boost the revenue increase when you have a longer duration storage, which is helpful for the developers of the clean energy. So it became, again, the basis of the R&D budget allocation in the Department of Energy, especially with the congested network, also the transmission line building aspects. So with that, yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm listening.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Our next speaker is Dr. Ji-Hyo Kim, Senior Research Fellow at the Korea Energy Economics Institute. Working at KEI for nearly a decade, she currently leads the Department of Energy Demand and Policy Analysis. Her research spans energy efficiency, demand outlook, and time of use pricing. She will talk about the energy efficiency for carbon neutrality, role and challenges. Please welcome Dr. Ji-Hyo Kim.
Good morning. My name is Ji-Hyo Kim. It's an honor to present my study result with such a great expert today. So today I will present my research titled as Energy Efficiency for Carbon Neutrality, Role and Challenges. Let me begin with the introducing IES comment on the role of energy efficiency this year. So IEA commented that focusing on energy efficiency action is the unambiguous first and best response to simultaneously meet affordability, supply security, and climate goals. So according to the IEA, energy efficiency must be improved by 4% annually until 2030. You can see that here. And considering that it was not easy to achieve an annual average of 2% in energy efficiency improvement in the past, so you can see that it seems necessary to accelerate energy efficiency improvement in the future. So let's look at Korean greenhouse gas emission history and carbon neutrality goal. In 2020, the Korean government declared carbon neutrality goal by 2050, and in the next year, it enacted the Carbon Neutrality Framework Act on Carbon Neutrality, and it enhanced the 2030 NDC goal. So, Korea's greenhouse gas emissions have steadily increased since 1990. As you can see in this figure, but have remained flat since peaking in 2018. You can see the peak here. And emissions in 2021 have recovered to pre-COVID level. However, but emissions in the last year are expected to decrease again due to the reduced emissions from energy transformation sectors such as power generation and economic slowdown. So considering the provisional values for last 2 years, it does not significantly deviate from the attached blue dot trend line. However, the Korea's 2030 NDC goal and 2050 carbon neutrality goal, greenhouse gas emissions should be reduced significantly and should be deviate from the trend line. So in this context, energy efficiency must be improved faster to accelerate the decline in greenhouse gas emissions. So the Korean government expects other positive effects besides reducing greenhouse gas emissions through improved energy efficiency. As the blue line in this graph shows Korea's dependence on fossil fuels is very high. It is about we import 90%, more than 90% of our fossil fuel from foreign countries, and led by here. In this graph shows Korea's energy import, which includes the red bars in the graph shows the Korean energy imports, which increased significantly in last year and had a negative impact on our trade balance. In other words, the trade balance can be improved and energy security can be expanded or improved by improving energy efficiency of fossil fuel. Also, unlike Europe or US, Korea has an isolated electric network. Since electric supply cannot be expected from foreign countries in Korea, the balancing cost of expanding renewable energy is huge. So therefore, improving the energy efficiency of electricity use is also very important. So starting from this awareness, this study examines the role of energy efficiency in achieving Korea's carbon neutrality path through scenario analysis. The research results are based on the long-term energy outlook published annually by our institute. This study examines the role of energy efficiency improvement and derives policy implications by comparing energy demand projections results for two scenarios achieving a carbon neutral path. So let's look at Korea's energy balance in 2021. An energy balance helps us to understand how energy projects are transformed into one another and highlights the various relationships among these products and shows how all energy types are ultimately used. Korea's primary energy supply in this year exceeds about 300 million TOE, and final energy consumption exceeds 200 million TOE. In Korea, the industrial sector's share of final energy consumption is very huge, more than 60%, and the naphtha consumption is high, around 20%, due to the development of the petrochemical industry. So this is the kind of, this balance shows the characteristics of energy supply and demand of Korea. So, based on this knowledge, Korea is the 9th largest energy consumer in the world, and the energy intensity, this graph shows the energy intensity of 6 countries and OECD average. However, the energy intensity that shows that national energy efficiency level shows the Korea energy intensity is higher than OECD average. So here is the OECD average and here is the Korean one. And you can see that the energy intensity has been decreased. It means that our energy efficiency at the national level has been improved. However, the pace of improvement in energy efficiency or intensity is also slower compared to the OECD countries. So, why is Korea's energy efficiency improving so slowly? So, here is the key to understand this. Help us to understand this puzzle. So, the left graph. You can see the left graph, and this graph shows the share of industries such as steel, iron, and chemical in the added value of the industrial sector. And the right graph shows the share of steel and chemicals in the industrial energy consumption. So the Korean economy is highly dependent on these energy intensive industries such as iron making or petrochemicals. And these industries have a low proportion of added value. However, their proportion on energy consumption is very high. Therefore, the higher the proportion of these industries, such as iron making or petrochemicals, the higher the energy intensity based on the added value. So this table shows the Korea's high energy intensity comes from these industrial characteristics. So the problem is that reducing energy consumption in the industrial sector is very, very, very difficult because the Korean economy is highly dependent on such industries, and the marginal efficiency of these industries are known to be very high compared to the competing industries. So the marginal efficiency improvement cost is very expensive. So this is the problem in terms of energy intensity or energy efficiency at the national level of Korea. So when improving energy efficiency is necessary but not easy, the Korean government presented a challenging goal to improve energy efficiency. So this blue line, you can see in this blue line and blue dot, shows the Korea's energy intensity change history. And you can see that energy intensity goal proposed by the government in this dot. There are several dots in this figure, and these dots are the energy intensity goal proposed by the government. So as you can see, the blue line in this graph showed the Korea's energy intensity has improved consistently, very, very consistently. However, considering the government energy intensity target indicated by this dot, energy efficiency must improve faster in the past. So considering that these goals were set with the vision of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, the trend of improving energy efficiency should accelerate by 2030. From an energy sector perspective, our institute annually presents long-term energy outlook, and today I will present our last year energy outlook result. In our last year outlook, we compare the path to achieve Korea's 2030 NDC and carbon neutrality in 2050. We explored paths to achieve these goals by comparing scenarios with different combination of reductions measures. So the results show that what the future can look like as a result of a government policy choice or technology choice. So in our analysis, we construct 3 scenarios titled as REF, EEI, and EOE. And the key to distinguishing these scenarios is assumptions about technology and policy changes. So to analyze these scenarios, we use our original model that is titled as KDIEGMS, and the outlook period covers until 2050. So here is our model. Our model is a bottom-up model, which is similar with IU's World Energy Outlook, or EIA is named. So first, we project energy demand. By sector: industry, transportation, residential, and by energy sources. Based on the outlook of the final energy consumption here, we project energy demand required in the energy transformation sector, such as power generation or heat generation. By combining these research results, we project total primary energy demand at the national level. Our outlook is presented in the form of energy balances. So let's take a closer look at the outlook for the final consumption. For the industry, we project energy demand by usage, and for 15 industries. And for the transportation, we project energy demand by road, marine, aviation, and rail. And in the residential sector, we project energy demand for heating and hot water supply, and cooking, cooling, and the use of home appliances. And service sector is also similar. Although there are differences by sector, we respectively project the demand for energy service and their intensity, and derive energy demand based on these projections. So let me explain scenarios designed in our outlook. First, the reference scenario, REF, assumes trend improvement in known technologies and current or confirmed policies And this scenario is a standard scenario for comparison. The other two scenarios, and the REF does not guarantee to meet the NDC or 2050 carbon neutrality goal. And the other two scenarios, EEI and EOE, are designed to achieve the sectoral greenhouse gas emission targets in 2030 and 2050. So EEI assumes rapid energy efficiency improvement and gradual electrification. And EOE assumes slower energy efficiency improvement and more rapid electrification than EEI. So in our scenario, we consider many greenhouse gas emission reductions, greenhouse gas reduction measures from the available information. So the measures are categorized into three: into energy efficiency improvement and fuel substitution, and the innovative technologies for hard-to-abate industries. The same assumptions apply in EEI and EOE, introducing and disseminating such innovative technologies. So this graph shows an example of energy efficiency improvement in EEI and EOE. So this graph shows an energy efficiency improvement in new equipment for indirect heating, that is boiler technology for the industrial sector. As you can see, energy efficiency improved faster, the fastest in EEI. So here is the orange line represent the EEI, and the green line represent EOE. So the EOEs in EOE, the energy efficiency improves faster than REF. However, the energy efficiency improves the fastest in the EEI. So I will explain the projection result briefly. The left graph showed the projection for the total final consumption by scenario, and the right graph showed the projection for the scope 1 emissions. Scope 1, you mean the direct emissions by sector, by scenario. So the blue line represents REF, and the green line represents EOE, and the orange line represents EEI. The result shows that to achieve NGE, energy efficiency should be improved about 15% by 2050 compared to the current level. And it is very challenging, huge challenge. And the total final consumption in 2050 should fall by more than 30% compared to the REF. And TFC in EEI decreased faster than TFC, total final consumption, and EOE due to increased energy efficiency. However, scope 1 emission in EEI are greater than those in EOE because transferring the greenhouse gas reduction burden to the energy transformation sector, so the scope 2s. However, their intermediate paths are quite different. So let's look at the projection result by sector. These three graphs showed energy demand outlook for the industry and the residential, transportation, and residential and service sector. So in this figure, you can see that most of the reduction in energy demand in EOE and EEI compared to REF occurs in the chemical industry. That's not coming. Yeah, okay. Sectors. So you can see that in EEI and EOE, oil demand decreased as the chemical industries non-energy oil demand such as naphtha is replaced with waste or synthetic materials. And in the transportation sector, replacing internal combustion engine vehicles with electric vehicles simultaneously improve fuel efficiency and reduce energy demand in the transformation sector. So, however, the share of industrial consumption decreased slightly during the outlook period because it remained 16% level. So our analysis is based on the Korea Institute of Industrial Economics KIET projections for the added value by industry. So our results are based on the premise that industrial structure will not change significantly during the carbon neutrality process. So the current manufacturing-centered energy consumptions will be maintained in the future. So let's look at the result by energy source. The three graphs below shows each scenario's outlook for the energy demand by energy source. So in EEI and EOE, electricity demand will account for over 45% of total final consumption by 2050. And current the share of electricity consumption is made about 20%, and electricity became a kind of a new oil in the future. And the share of electricity rapidly rise from to 20% in 2020, and in 2030 until up to more than 30% in EOE, whereas EEI increases slightly after 2030. So demand for renewables will increase due to the expansion of solar power for self-generation, heat pump installation, and application of bio-naphtha technology. And hydrogen demand will increase due to replacement coal demand in the industrial sector and dissemination of hydrogen vehicles. So we found that electricity demand increased faster in EOE than EEI. So in our analysis, electricity demand fluctuates depending on factors such as energy efficiency and electrification degree and expansion of self-generation and green hydrogen production, and varies greatly depending on the scenario. Electrification decreases scope 1 emissions but may burden Korea's energy system, which operates on isolated grid with restricted measures of reducing greenhouse gas emissions in power sector. Currently, electrification technology that has secured economic feasibility, such as heat pump or indirect heating using electricity, are also lacking economic feasibility in the Korea. So the difference in electricity demand shows that the role of energy efficiency in Korea. Energy efficiency improve can reduce the burden of energy system by controlling the speed of electrification in the process of carbon neutrality. So, in this situation, we will look at the current status and challenges for the energy efficiency policy. The most recent government plan for Korea's energy efficiency policy was announced last year, and this policy aims to improve energy intensity by 25% until the end of the regime, and by implementing the following 10 measures. Yeah, and then you can see the 10 measures. I will skip the detailed explanation about these measures. So the Korean government provides various measures to improve energy efficiency, including regulation, incentives, and information provision. However, the complexity of governance surrounding the energy efficiency is a huge obstacle to policy development and implementation. So currently, ministries such as the Minister of Environment or Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy, and Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport are involved in energy efficiency policy. In this process, there are cases where policy decision making is delayed, or difficulties in policy implementation are encountered due to problems with the interministerial consultations. So another barrier is decreasing government budget. This table shows the government budget change from 2010 and this year. Compared to 2010, the government budget for energy efficiency has been decreased more than 40%. And energy efficiency loan in this year are approximately half of the 2010 budget. And government plans to relate to energy efficiency has been strengthened during this period. However, the budget has been decreased. And The final and most critical barrier is that our energy rates are highly regulated. As the government regulates electricity rate, and as the government in Korea, the government regulates electricity rate. So there are some cases where the retail price is even lower than KEPCO's purchasing prices. So you can see this complexity in this graph. So despite fluctuation in international energy prices during this period, fluctuation in retail electricity rate has been limited. You can see that. So energy rates lose their functions of price signal and fail to induce energy efficiency investment in the private sector. So the energy efficiency investment in Korea is currently highly dependent on government budget. However, but the government budget has been decreased during the 2 decades, so it's kind of a huge problem. So let me conclude the presentation with this slide. Korea, which operates an independent grid, has high cost to accommodate the promotion of such a variable renewable energies and renewable energy stably. So in Korea, the cost of electrification considered a potent greenhouse gas reduction alternative is also likely to be higher than in the United States or Europe. So electrification is an unavoidable option to achieve carbon neutrality in many countries and in Korea. However, but controlling its speed and degree by improving energy efficiency can reduce the cost for carbon neutrality. So our analysis shows that electricity demand to achieve the greenhouse gas reduction goals can vary significantly depending on the energy efficiency improvement. Therefore, the role of energy efficiency in Korea is more important than other countries. However, due to the high dependence on energy-consuming industries such as iron making or petrochemicals, improving energy efficiency dramatically is very, very difficult. So it is necessary to develop technologies that can overcome these limitations. And it is also necessary to streamline governments and increase public investment and restore the price signal of energy rate. So this is end of my presentation. Thank you for paying attention and listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kim, for the presentation. Next up, we'll have a discussion and Q&A session. I'd like to introduce our designated discussant, Dr. Yu, a noted expert in urban environmental change, joining us online. Professor Zhou was affiliated with Iowa State University when he initially participated in this project and has since moved to the University of Hong Kong, but he continues to provide meaningful insights to this event. Please give a warm virtual welcome to Professor Zhou.
Great events. Also to moderate this section, energy and societal. And I wish I could join this meeting in person, but due to the application of visa, I cannot travel to Korea. So hopefully next year I have the opportunity to join the event in person. As we know, the energy and the societal are important for carbon neutrality, which is critical to address climate change and mitigate the negative impact of climate change, such as the increasing energy demand and the increasing of extreme events. Energy and societal play important role for the carbon neutrality. The energy sector is the major source of greenhouse gas emissions, which make it the key target to reduce the carbon footprint. For societal's action and choice for them how to use the energy, such as adopting energy efficient practice and cleaner energy sources, have an important and direct impact on carbon emissions. So it is crucial for carbon neutrality. And in this section, the energy and the societal, we have three interesting and important presentations. And in the first presentation by Dr. Nina Kelsey and Dr. Koo, they give a presentation on comparison of city-level climate policy drivers in the ROK and the USA. And in the second talk by Dr. Kim from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, he gave a presentation on renewable battery hybrid power plants in congested electricity markets, implication for plant configuration. And in the last talk by Dr. Ji-Yu Kim from Korea Energy Economics Institute, she talked about the energy efficiency for carbon neutrality in Korea for the law and change of in energy efficiency. And because these talks have a lot of information, I just based on my understanding, and I have a short summary for each of this presentation. And for the first talk by Dr. Nina Kelsey and Dr. Koo, sorry, from the schedule, I only saw the name of the Dr. Nina Kelsey. I didn't include the name Dr. Koo in the summary. And in their talk, comparison of city-level climate policy drivers in the ROK and the USA, Dr. Kelsey started from case studies in Sweden and Portugal for the carbon emission reduction policy. And then they compared the carbon emission policy in Korea and the U.S. jurisdictions. It included a number of cities such as Daegu and Gwangju in Korea, and Iowa City in Iowa, St. Petersburg in Florida, and Flagstaff in Arizona. And so they got some very interesting results, and they compared the similarity and the difference among this Korea and the U.S. cities. I cannot summarize all of the findings, but I have here I give some important ones. And they find the U.S. motivations seems to be considerably more driven by ideological factors compared to Korea. But both U.S. and Korea justifications show high level of consensus in regard of the policy when they are established. And they also find that the presence of knowledge holder and book play a crucial role in both U.S. and Korea. And these interesting and important results have critical policy implications. And for example, they suggest that decentralized node of climate policy expertise is highly encouraged in as many as local jurisdictions as possible. And also they suggested policy entrepreneurs should learn and adapt to local drivers. And I will summarize the question for all of these three talks together. Let me finish the summary of these talks and then present the questions for all of them. And in the second talk by Dr. Han-Won Kim, renewable battery hybrid power plants in congested electricity markets, implication for plant configuration. He first talk about the background of this research for the transmission constraints and hybrid plants. For example, transmission constraints may lead to congested region, and it has important results like it can impact the wholesale electricity price, reduce renewable energy integration, and also could lead to optional deployment strategies. And hybrid plants have been suggested as a solution to counter this value decline and maintain the reliability of the power grid. And for his research, it aims to improve understanding of the impact of hybrid configuration on project value in congested regions in U.S. His presentation has a lot of results and findings and are very interesting. So I cannot include all of them. So I include several key findings and implications here. And Dr. Kim finds hybrid plants in congested region provide a range of value, but this depend on the configuration of the hybrid plants and also external conditions that influence them. And he also suggested factors such as battery duration, degradation cost, and renewable energy correlation should be considered when planning a hybrid project in congested regions. So it is well known the renewable energy penetration will continue and already continued in the past. And so Dr. Kim's research and study laid the foundation for more efficient and cost-effective electricity system in the future in US. And in the third talk by Dr. Jin-Ho Kim, Energy Efficiency for Carbon Neutrality in Korea, the law and challenges. She also briefly talked about the background of this research. This is because the high dependency on fossil fuel import and isolated electric network in Korea. So the energy efficiency is important for carbon neutrality. And her research aims to understand the role of energy efficiency in achieving carbon neutrality in Korea. In order to achieve this goal, she used a model developed by KEI, the EGMS, Energy Greenhouse Gas Modeling System, and she explored the long-term energy outlook in Korea from 2021 to 2050 on the three scenarios, carefully designed scenarios, which include the reference scenario, IEF, the energy efficiency improvement scenario, EEI, and the third one is the EOE, the electrification of end-use scenario. And also, there are many interesting and inspiring results, and which also have critical implications for the carbon neutrality in Korea. And for example, she finds the chemical industry and the transportation sectors are important to reduce the energy demand in both scenarios, the EOE and the EEI, energy efficiency improvement scenario and electrification of end-use scenario. She also finds that renewable and hydrogen demand will increase with expansion of solar power and the replacement of the coal demand. I find that the most important finding from her presentation is the role of electrification and energy efficiency. And she finds the enhancement in energy efficiency can mitigate the strain on energy system by managing the pace of the electrification in Korea. Finally, the law of the law of energy efficiency in Korea is more critical for carbon neutrality in comparison with other countries such as US because of the higher cost associated with the intermittent renewable energy and electrification. So this is a very simple summary from three presentations because there are a lot of information and I cannot give a very comprehensive summary about their finding and the method. Here, I have some questions for discussion. So for the first talk, why greenhouse gas reduction goals are typically established at the national level. They are primarily performed at the local level, such as city level and county level. So my question is, what capacities and resources do we need at the local level to reduce the carbon emission in this regard, in addition to the policy? And for the second talk, the research is performed at in US. So my question for the second talk is, how do transmission constraints affect countries with small areas such as Korea? And what is the role of the renewable battery hybrid power plants if we have this transmission constraint in the country with small area? And for the third talk, I have two questions. The first one, in the context of achieving carbon neutrality, what is the role of potential climate change aside from energy and societal? Because as we know, we are experiencing climate change now and also in the future. And climate change may impact the energy demand and also energy supply, like the wind energy, solar energy. So how do we consider these potential factors? And the second question for the third talk, what other factors beyond the energy efficiency should be considered in the policy development to achieve carbon neutrality? For example, how do human activity interact with the energy system, the earth system, and the local climate? Because the interact is important, and how do we consider this interaction when we develop the policy for carbon neutrality? And based on these three presentations in this sector, this section, the energy and societal, and I want to briefly talk about our related research in two areas. One is the city-scale building energy use modeling. And in this area, we developed a city-scale building energy model to estimate the building energy use at the single building level and the hourly basis by combining energy plus a mechanical-based energy model with geospatial data, such as building prototype, access parcel data, building footprint data, and building floor numbers from satellite remote sensing data. And based on this city-scale building energy model, we can estimate the building energy for each single building and also hourly level. And the building energy use is mainly determined by the building size, the footprint, and the building type, like different type of building, office, hospital, and the building floor number, as well as the local microclimate around the buildings, like the temperature, the humidity. And based on this model, we also can estimate the building energy use at the hourly level. Using this building model, we can evaluate the factors such as the energy efficiency impact on the building energy use from single building to the city level for the entire city. Moreover, this model can be used to evaluate the climate change as well as the extreme events like the heat wave and urban heat island impact on the building energy use from the single building to the entire city. Finally, this building energy model can be used to evaluate the human behavior, like the building operations, for their impact on the building energy use and the associated carbon emission. And the second talk I want to briefly discuss is the other factor, in addition to the energy efficiency, the urban form and the urban density, for their impact on the energy demand, energy use. Here, the building energy use. From this slide, we can see the urban form, urban density for 4 example cities like New York, London, Beijing, and Hong Kong. We can see the urban form and urban density are very different for these cities. Like New York and Hong Kong, the urban density is very high, and London, the urban density is relatively low. This different urban density, urban form can lead to different per capita floor area, which is highly correlated with the building energy demand. So in addition to the energy efficiency, this urban density and the urban form also play an important role in the building energy demand in the future. So we investigated the impact of urban density and energy efficiency on building energy demand across 11 global regions using our integrated assessment modeling framework, GCAM, Global Change Assessment Model. And also, we included the global level result here in this plot. And by taking the global result as an example, the X is the year and the Y is the annual building energy use or demand. And we include the 3 urban density scenarios, low from the left, then medium and high urban density. And we also included the energy efficiency improvement scenario to compare. Like the solid line is the business as usual scenario, and the dotted line is the advanced scenario with faster energy efficiency improvement. And from the global result, we can see the dense urban development can lead to less energy use overall. Like if we compare the low urban density and the high urban density, the difference is about 15% of the total. So dense urban development can reduce the total building energy use by 15%. And we also can compare the solid line and the dashed line. So it indicated the efficiency impact, and the urban density can influence the future energy use as much as the energy efficiency. So we can see this magnitude is similar as the magnitude if we compare the solid line and the dashed line. But if we compare different regions, not at the global level, we find this law of urban density and efficiency are different across region. Like in the region of North America, and we can see the urban density is the impact is much lower compared to the efficiency. But in the area such as the East Asia, the urban density plays similar role as the energy efficiency. And these are two case studies that are relevant to this section and also the three presentations. So I want to bring attention to this section. And so I can move to the question for us to start the discussion section. Thank you again for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Zhou, for the discussion. We'll now open the discussion to the floor, so please wait for a minute while we set up the stage. Let me invite the speakers to please come up to the stage again. Dr. Zhou, the microphone is yours again.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you again for joining this section, and we can start the question section. So I include several questions in the discussion. So should I start the question first, or is there some question from the audience?
I think it's on. In previous sessions, we've started by answering the questions posed by the discussants. So does anyone want to go first?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so Professor Zhou, thank you for your comment and questions. And you gave me a question that is there other measures to mitigate or meet the goal of greenhouse gas emissions besides energy efficiency? So you mentioned the possibility of human activities, and it is very, very important to change human activities to be changed, including as you mentioned, and I think that the human activities, including energy using behavior, should be changed to meet the carbon neutrality goals. So we have to save our energy, and we have to change our lifestyle to use less energy and to demand a less amount of energy services. And we have to take a less comfort about in case of using energy. So it is very important, and we have to change our lifestyles. And in Korea, there is other measures very important compared to energy efficiency, because my presentation did with my presentation focused on energy demand and efficiency, but it is very important to decrease greenhouse gas emissions from power generation sectors. So the Korea's challenge is to supply electricity generated from carbon-free resources such as renewables and nuclear, and it's kind of a huge debate, and huge debate on which is our best strategy to achieve carbon neutrality. So, and Professor Cho, your research is focused on building sector, and building sector is also important in Korea. But I think that the share of greenhouse gas emissions of building sector in Korea is less than maybe 20 or 30%, and the core is industry sector, because the Korea economy is highly dependent on energy-intensive industries, and their share on greenhouse gas emissions or energy consumption is very huge. So to meet the carbon neutrality goal, we need to focus on industry sector, and we have to develop innovative technologies for the iron making or petrochemicals, and it's global change, but this challenge is more important in our Korea. So yeah, and this is my answer, and thank you for your comment and discussion.
Thank you very much for your answers to these questions.
Right, so I'll probably go next. Yeah, thanks, Dr. Zhou, again, for the thoughtful discussion, and I'll answer some of your questions. And before that, I felt really bad for the audience for the night of your sessions, because we are self-talking too much. So there are probably less questions from the floor. So I'll shorten my answer as much as possible, and I hope we can have more questions from the floor. So yeah, what is the transmission line congestion and renewable battery hybrid and its implication on the small countries and nations like Korea, for example? So I think I want to bring up a few things. For the supply side is Jeju Island, where the renewable energy is abundant and where a lot of wind power plant generation is there. However, there is just too much energy generation, but the energy generated there is two issues. One is it curtailed too much because it doesn't have a storage capacity. So the clean energy, the free energy, is curtailed too much. So if there is a hybrid energy power plants to store those energies, then it might be very beneficial. And also those energies, the clean energies, cannot really reach to the mainland of Korea because there is no transmission line. So if there's a transmission line without congestion and there's a full capacity, then the mainland of Korea, South Korea, can enjoy the free energy. And for your perspective, also for the load pocket side, the smart the buildings and the smart cities will have a lot of electrification, meaning there will be a lot of load and demand increase. So it depends on how those buildings will be equipped with the solar and energy storage. However, if those buildings will need a lot of demand consumption, then it needs a clean energy resources to the urban centers like I've introduced in the case of the US. Then even the small cities in Korea, like highly populated urban dense area, will need a clean energy from somewhere, and in this case, the transmission line. Also, the nearby renewable energy plus energy storage hybrid will be beneficial. So that is my answer.
Oh, great. Thank you very much for your answers. You provide a very good example to this question.
I also want to give my thanks to Dr. Zhou for your fantastic question, which I think could be an entire research program of its own. But I want to just briefly give my thoughts on it. And I do think it's a particularly interesting question because I'm not sure that what we found in terms of the resources that are helping cities are going to be an exact match for what policy interventions could try to build on. So for instance, thus far we've found that having motivated university folks in the city has been very helpful, but obviously I don't think the policy intervention there is to establish a university in every single city. That's not a reasonable way of doing that. So I think governments do need to think about how to replicate that kind of effect in a different way. We also found the importance, and this was consonant with that other paper that Professor Ko mentioned, of city officials, so cities that appoint an official to sort of focus or head up the management of climate and energy policy. That serves a similar function in terms of embedding expertise and providing continuity. And that might be a more direct target for, say, a national policy intervention, say, offering funding for cities to do that or something like that. I don't know if Professor Ko wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, Dr. Ko, do you have any comments?
Yes, just to briefly mention, I would reiterate that in terms of resources, the expertise resources may proceed and then followed by the financial resources, because we talked about a lot of urban energy intensities and scenarios that are really conducive to each local context. But when you go out there in each cities, there are not many people who can carry out those research and then make that into a continued infrastructure. One of the things that Gwangju is doing well is they are updating real-time greenhouse gas inventory, which was I think the first experiment in all of the cities in Korea. And then also the knowledge broker may open up this opportunity for the cities to engage in a global network, from which they can get the resources. For instance, I want to highlight this one name in Daegu. Professor Kim Jong-dal was a student of Professor John Byrne in University of Delaware, who was, for example, in 2001, was a member of the Global Cities Compact, and then could reach those network resources into the Daegu. So that became almost the genesis of experts first talking about the climate change, and that now became the infrastructure and the research institute. So I would believe that government investment can be made in this regard, where they have these funds to establish and attract a lot of young professionals into each local cities to make them be a good player to fill in the gaps of such as rotational policy in Korea.
Great, thank you both for your comments and the answers to the questions. And especially I like Nina's comment about the connection between the government and the universities. So I hopefully this kind of connection can, strengthen and also improve the policy development to reduce the carbon emission. I'm also very, very happy to involve in such kind of activities. I think we have a question from the floor, right? Do we have a question from the floor?
Yes, we do.
They're bringing the microphone over.
I have many questions. I'll just pick one theme, I guess. So this notion about nature-based solutions, we've not talked very much about trying to develop substitute products, for instance, that don't use the steel and aluminum and the heavy energy density products that are so difficult to manage today. I heard you mention bio-naphtha, for instance, as one possibility. We have the ability to use cross-laminated timber to replace construction materials. We can, for instance, use waste gases from products, and we can use composting, change our diet. Lots of things we can do to try to alter the hard to tackle emissions and consumption-based products that I know is very big in Korea. I've heard that for the past 24 hours that Korea is an enormous manufacturer of almost like China, manufacturer of the world. 30% or something, much bigger. And ours in the United States, our industrial emissions are growing too. It's the fastest growing sector of the economy. So really, this question should also be turned around, and asked of my own analysts. But so for Korea, maybe Dr. Kim, this would be one for you because you're doing all this modeling. What do you think about the nature-based options? Let's see. I hope I got. Yes, Kim.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there are many nation-based options, including wood pellets or bioenergy and waste energy. But however, the potential of these nature-based energy resources, such as wood pellets or timber or waste energy, are limited in Korea. So we have to, if we want to use these nature-based resources, we have to import them from foreign countries. So, and this is first obstacle. And if there is a increased need for these resources, and their price will rapidly hike up. So in this case, we have to in our industry has difficulties to secure these resources in an efficient economic way. And this is the first obstacle. So our industry is very our industry is focusing on the possibility using hydrogen on an alternative. So the key technologies currently we mentioned about is the iron making using hydrogen, or synthetic naphtha making using carbon, which is captured, and combining this captured carbon to hydrogen and making by synthetic naphtha. So we have to consider a lot of alternatives, and we have to choose which one is the best strategy, or which combination is best strategy for our to reduce our industrial emissions while still continue our economic growth. And we have another challenge to change our industrial structure. Currently, we are highly dependent on iron making and petrochemicals, and many scholars have thought about our future. What is our next growth engine? So currently, we have to focus on these iron making or petrochemicals because the COVID and the energy supply crises, we know that the security is kind of backbone industries. However, but we have to change our industrial structure toward more in a way of emission, in a way of reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that's my answer. Thank you for your comment and question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim, for your insight about the nature-based solution in Korea. And I think we only have one last question because our time is over. So, but this question is from the student. So I think we should give a young scientist the opportunity to ask questions. So, I think we can, go ahead.
Thanks for the presentations. My question was about the local government leaders, their motivations for choosing green policy options. You mentioned different motivations like ideological and economy, but just I was thinking in U.S., is there any correlation between the green policy options of the political leaders and their affiliation to Democratic or Republican political party? Yeah, and the second question is related to hybrid energy system in congestion area. So it means congestion, and we combine different sources of energy. So in this case, it means we should expect a lot of challenges in that kind of area. Do you think what are the challenges, and how we can address those challenges? And do you think it's better to implement this kind of approach in non-congestion area also? because the acceptability of the people would increase, is better than non-congestion area. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think we have two questions, one for Dr. Nina and Dr. Kim, Ku, and then for Dr. Kim.
So I will try to be very quick. Yes, there's absolutely, from what I've seen so far, a political correlation there. I tried to be, I said I couldn't select at random, and you really can't, but I did try to go into this focusing mainly on finding cities that were just scattered around regions and that were engaging in the kind of policies that we were looking at without selecting on that kind of variable. And I ended up with 3 Democratic mayors. So yeah, I think there's an early suggestion of that, and it's not surprising given how polarized the US is around this issue. I will be wanting to look not only for negative cases in terms of cities that are comparable that didn't do this, but also cities that might offer some variation. So I might go looking specifically for a city with a Republican administration that did this. But a quick addition to that, I would say, is one thing that kind of unites the findings about political motivation and also knowledge brokers is one of the mayors that I interviewed, the mayor of Iowa City, is actually a professor at the University of Iowa. He was a professor when he ran, and he has become a professor. I mean, he's a professor again now that he's gone. So I thought that was an interesting crossover in terms of ideological commitment and knowledge expertise.
I'll definitely answer the second question. But for the first question, I joined the National Lab when the Trump administration was there, and I was focusing on the renewable energy. And I was still focusing on renewable energy with the Biden administration. So there are a lot of, if you can come to me in person, then I can answer more. So for the second question, yes, there are challenges, definitely. The one is regulatory challenges. Like the reason that where the solar plus hybrid, energy storage hybrid is more common than the wind one was not because the technology is superior, but because of the regulatory design to incentivize those hybrid. It was through the investment tax credit where the solar plus energy storage having, for example, like more money if you compared to when you're combining the wind plus energy storage. But that was resolved through the Inflation Reduction Act and the following bills. So there are some regulatory challenges, but it's kind of solving out by itself. And also the technology challenges, meaning if you want to have 90%, 100% clean renewable energy and the power sector, then we want to have almost everything through the renewable energies. However, then if there are challenging times of like 5 days of the no wind or 1 month of the no solar in some of the regions, then there is energy storage is necessary. And probably 1 to 8 hours of the energy storage duration may not be enough. So we may need to think about even longer duration. And that will become a technology challenges, and a lot of DOEs and national lab effort with the industry has been solving out all that. And your last question is a non-congested area. I'll probably translate a little bit slightly differently where there is no transmission lines. For example, if there is some isolated area with a lot of industry going on, however, not necessarily having a transmission line nearby. And these days, a lot of the requirements are coming with the where did you get the energy sources, for example, RE100. So if you have an RE100, meaning if you get all the energy resources from the renewable energy, then you're qualified to do some more options to sell your products. For in that case, if there's a transmission line that you cannot really get the renewable energy from other adjacent areas, then probably one of the only solution or more efficient solution is having a hybrid, for example, solar or wind plus energy storage, so it can more durable during the time of the day. That is more needed for the industry to have all the energy resources from the clean energy source, so you can meet the RE100 standard without necessarily having a transmission line nearby to get a source of the renewable energy from other areas. So yeah, in this case, it might be useful to have a hybrid for that matter. So I hope I answered the question.
Great, thank you all for your answers to the questions. And sorry for the lateness. And again, thank you all for joining this section, this inspiring section. And we have very interesting and inspiring presentations from this section. And thank you all.
All right, let's give a big round of applause to all the speakers. All right, we're running late, but we'll have a short coffee break until 12:10. Thank you very much. We'll resume the session shortly, so please take your seats. Now let us begin the last session of the event on climate change mitigation policies. We're already expected to have a very late lunch, so I kindly ask the speakers to please keep the time. To kick off the last session, let me introduce the first speaker, Jin-tae Kim, a PhD student in environmental planning from Seoul National University. He will be speaking about a project he works with Professor Jong-ho Hong on developing an integrated assessment model for energy transition and carbon mitigation policies, a CGE approach with a focus on Northeast Asian region. Please welcome Mr. Jin-tae Kim to the podium.
Hi everyone, so I'm Jin-tae Kim, a PhD student at Seoul National University. So today on behalf of my supervisors, also mentors, the Professor Jong-ho Hong, so I will deliver these presentations. So this research title is the Developing Integrated Assessment Model for Energy Transition and Carbon Mitigation Policies. The subtitle, so I want to change my subtitles because I'm gonna talk about the two models. So based top-down and bottom-up approach models with a focus on the Northeast Asia regions. Okay. So in the introduction, so I will explain why we choose the Northeast Asia focus of this research. And then I will provide an overview and some results of the Northeast Asia CG models. And also I will briefly introduce the comparison study using with the another model, which is called MESSAGE. And finally, recap these presentations and suggest some potential discussion points. So Northeast Asia includes 6 countries, so China, Japan, Korea, Russia, Mongolia, and North Korea. Then why we care about these reasons? Because this reason is one of the major economic reasons and greenhouse gas emitters. So it is accounting for 26% of the global GDP. And as I know, it is slightly larger than the US GDP. And it is accounting for nearly 40% of global greenhouse gases. And also, this reason has significant contributor to LNG and coal imports, and also has high concern for air pollution on health impact. So in the 2021, so China, Japan, and South Korea accounted for over half of the world's LNG imports. So LNG means the liquefied natural gases. And also these 3 countries account to 40 to 45% of the global coal imports. So as you may already know, so these coal and gas imports are used to generate electricity and produce steel products and cooking or heating for house. And yeah, so many people in these regions so have a high concern about the air pollutions. So as you can see in the right side pictures, so shows the sector shares of the air pollution emissions. So SO2 and NOx are precursors to the fine particulate matters. So most air pollution comes from the fossil fuel combustions. So to study the energy transition scenarios and towards the net zero emission targets in these regions, Northeast Asia, so we decided to develop an IAM. So I found a definition from Wikipedia. So it can be introduced as follow. So I will read this. So integrated assessment modeling is a scientific modeling that tries to link main features of society and economy with the biosphere and atmosphere in one modeling framework. And also, the goal of the IAM is to accommodate, inform the policy making, so usually in context of the climate change. So in this picture shows the family tree of the global scenario model. So here is the yellow area. Here is the DICE model. So yesterday, Dr. Hardings mentioned it. And among the numerous IAMs, so we chosen the computable general equilibrium, the CGE model. So this model is determined the supply and demand based on the price mechanism, and also include the multi-sector and multi-agents, such as agriculture sectors, power sectors, and household and governments. And usually it is used for the external shock analysis related to the economic impact. And I think so we are a latecomer in this field, so we decided to develop our CG models based on the PEP, which is the Partnership for Economic Policy CG models, because I think it is the well-documented and open source model. And model is open sources, but data does not. So we use the GTAP power databases as an input data provided by the Purdue University. And GTAP means the Global Trade Analysis Project. And recently, 11 version is released, so we will be using it in the next year. So this slide summarizes the general information about the NEA CGE model. Hereafter, I will call the Northeast Asia as NEA. So model type is the general equilibrium, and it covers the world in 17 regions. And objective this model is that to understand the interaction between economic and energy, particularly about the NEA countries, climate and air pollution policies. And solution horizon is a recursive dynamic with the myopic perspective, so it can not consider the intertemporal choices. Base year is 2019, and horizon is 2015. And for the policies law, now it is grayed out, so because we are still developing these models, but with these models, we can analyze the economic impact of the carbon taxes or cap and trade. So for the regional classification, so we follow the EASA's message models. So EASA means the International Institute for Applied Energy System, Applied System Analysis. And message, I will explain the later slides. So this regional mapping is a mixed definitions, countries and regional groups. So 6 NEA countries and 11 regional groups. And especially for the North Korea, I think it is most challenging country to get the data. So there is no options, so we assume the PRK is a mixed regions of the Macau and North Korea. Yeah, so I'll move to the next slide. So for the sector classifications, so all the 76 sectors in the GTAP database, so to map a new 23 sectors, concordance with the world energy balances, flow and energy products definitions, because to calculate the CO2 emissions, we need energy unit data. And especially for the power sectors, it consists of the T&D, which means transmission and distribution, and also generations by fuel sources, so coal and gas, hydro and nuclear, and wind, solar, and the other. Yeah, so there is a time limitation, so I skip this slide and move to the next slide. So here is the baseline calibrations. So we used EASA's SSP2 socioeconomic projections. SSP means shared economic pathway. So baseline is calibrated following the GDP growth rate from the SSP2 in the middle load. And lighter side pictures is a conceptual framework, a conceptual floors to relate to the how do we calibrate the baseline scenarios. And in this study, baseline means counterfactual futures without any climate impacts and climate policies. And to capture energy substitutions, so we modified the model structures. So for example, suppose the rise of the energy prices, then with the KLE nest, KLE means capital, labor, and energy, the quantity of energy demand will fall, and the demand of K and L and will rise. So it means we installed more high energy efficiency equipment or capacities and hired new employees for the energy savings. So move to the preliminary results. Here are the base year results. So left side graph shows the amount of KLE energy shares by regions, and right side shows the compositions of, so right side graph shows the composition of the energy commodity for intermediate use. So intermediate means the industrial energy use. As mentioned earlier, NEA has a high energy dependency. So NEA has large share of the energy commodities in KLE bundle compared to the other regions. And also, as you can see the graph, the China has the largest share of the coal energy. So this is the reason why we include the Mongolia and PRK. Both countries have small size energy system, but export a lot of coal to China. Yeah, for the baseline scenario results, so I think now it is close to the frozen scenarios. So with no structure changes from the base year. So it is naive-based scenario, yeah. But based on the socioeconomic projections and assumed autonomous energy efficiency improvement by 1% in all regions and all sectors and all energy types. So in the futures, NEA CO2 emission growth will decrease compared to historical pathway between the 2000 and 2020. So it was doubled in the 2000 between 20. Okay, then switch the gear. So I want to show the comparison study. So we have been studying the energy transition scenarios in collaboration with the EASA. So with the same research framework, so we have been developing message IX model focused on the NEA. So full name of the message is Model for Energy Supply Strategies and Their General Environmental Impacts. Message also is mathematical models, and it is widely used to planning decarbonization pathway. Also this slide summarizes the general information about the message R17 models. So unlike the CG models, so message model is technology detailed model. So we could analyze the diffusion of the carbon reduction technologies, and the solution concept is the partial equilibrium. So demand is exogenous variable. And also this model found a solution in a way to minimize their energy system cost. And also the base year is 2015 and horizon is considered the full centuries. So originally the global model, global message model has 11 reasons, but focus on the NEA reasons. We added new 6 countries, and also we introduced new energy trading configurations for the pipeline gases and LNGs. Here is the scenario narratives in the bottom up. Baseline means also without the policy interventions, and for the climate policy, we consider 2 and 1.5 degree global climate target scenarios. So with the new model, I analyzed the two global carbon budget scenarios. Yeah, so this slide shows the scenario results from the message model. So right side graph shows the NEA CO2 emission projections until 2100 by scenario. And the left side shows the total primary energy supply mix. So to achieve the climate target, so NEA requires the rapid emission reductions. So compared to baseline CO2 emissions in the 2015, in the 2-degree scenario decreased nearly 75%, and 1.5 scenario also nearly decreased by 90%. And also, under the stringent targets, it needs to coal to renewable paths, not the coal to gas pathway. Yeah, so this is the summary. So recap the main points of this presentations. We developed a new CGE and message models focused on the Northeast Asia. But compared to advanced CGE models such as EPPA, EPA models developed by MIT in US and AIM CGE models developed by the NIS in Japan, I think we are in the early stage. So we need more lessons and experience to how to analyze the natural transition scenarios using by CGE model. And for the NEA energy transitions and carbon mitigation scenarios, so for now NEA has high energy dependency. So and for the baseline scenario, compared to the past trends, the CO2 emission growth will decrease, and also under the more stringent climate target scenario, it needs to coal to renewable pathways. Yeah, so this is my final slide of my presentations. So I set up some potential discussion points. So number one is related to the global versus and regional models. So normally in the global models, they define the reasons as the aggregated reasons. But in the national or regional or city level models, the definition is different. And also they have different endowments or natural resources. And number two is related to the modeling approach. So we can compare the top-down and bottom-up model. So message has strengths in the describing or depict the new energy technologies such as CCS or hydrogens. And also CGE can capture the economic impacts such as steel trade or household consumptions and GDPs. But message model only consider the energy system, so they can depict or describe the economic impacts of the carbon nutrition scenario. And third one is related to the how to setting the baseline scenarios. So recently there is some reshuffling the trade nodes. So related to the steels or the energy commodities. So it is important for the NEA reasons. So we can consider the impacts of the US manufacturer reshoring on the NEA economy, and also pipeline natural gas trade between the Russia and EU. So it could be accelerated between the transactions, the China and Russia. So I brought three topics for the potential discussions, and maybe we can more discuss in the discussion and Q&A sessions. Okay, so thanks for the listening to my presentations.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Kim. Our next presenter is Dr. Hyung-Sik Choi. Since joining KEI in 2021, he has been working on energy system modeling and low carbon technology policy analysis. He will present on achieving net zero emissions in South Korea's electricity sector, its impacts on generation costs and fuel imports. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Che.
Hello, everyone. This is also, we talk about, Korea's power sector natural scenarios and its impact on the generation cost and pure import. This is also co-work with our colleagues at KEI, Dr. Kim Yong-gun and other colleagues. And as we also mentioned, discussed in the morning, recently, fossil price spikes also affect fuel import costs significantly to South Korea, and our, total import cost, now take up around 2.5% of the total GDP is significantly, affecting our economy and negatively affect our economy. And then, depending on fossil fuel in the future, will also adversely affect our economy. And also there are many other studies already look at this aspect, cost also benefit of energy transition, and this one study showed that the traditional model have include some technological progress of renewable energy, but they underestimate the empirical evidence. Based on empirical evidence, their projection it shows that much lower LCOE level in the long term. And in the same study shows, there it shows three options: fast transition and slow transition and no transition. And so fast transition also represent more rapid technological progress because government will support more renewable R&D spending, increase R&D spending, and all the indirect costs will be moved. But slow transition means those barriers exist in the market. And then all transition costs will change. And in the end, final net saving in the transition cost will be changed. And in the fast transition shows around $20 trillion is at the global level. So we also is an interesting aspect of energy transition. And this is another case study of EU. So there's one study shows how different net zero scenarios affect average price of electricity. The interesting point is in the near term, price increase in 2035, but in the long term, it will decrease. But one red line shows that that is the scenario focusing on supply side changes. Demand is high, and in the end, price slowly increase because it requires more hydrogen use and storage capacities. And otherwise, if we decrease demand, those price spikes will be dampened. So in the end, like in other scenarios. And another case study in the U.S. In the U.S. recently they announced to achieve 100 clean electricity by 2035, and there's a study done by NREL, National Renewable Energy Laboratory in the U.S. And in the recent report shows because they achieve early in the 2035, their energy system cost will increase, but it's less than 20% of total energy system cost, roughly. These two infrastructure and all option scenarios quite positive policy narratives, and other constraint, no CCS is negative. Scenarios, but they are a little bit different, but in the good case, it's less than 20%. But including, also the report shows, including benefit of avoided climate and health damage, total benefit is much larger than cost. And NREL also recently published a report because we have already renewable energy in all over the world. total saving, global saving, I mean, since 2000 is around $521 billion US. And onshore, I mean, produce a lot of electricity now, and hydro takes large share, and Asia also benefit a lot, and Europe also benefiting from having this renewable capacity because they don't need to import fossil fuel. So my study's goal is analyzing benefit and cost of net zero electric system for South Korea. I mean, I consider two mitigation paths, BAU and neo net zero scenarios. And I accounted for two, price and cost scenarios in my analysis. And the cost is changes in total energy system cost. And the benefit is changes in fuel import cost from overseas. And I didn't account for any environmental benefit. That means avoided climate, air pollution damages. And I used our in-house power sector model. It's also called Unicorn Power Model. It's also developed by, supported by Korean Minister of Environment R&D project. It's a dynamic cost optimization model with a perfect foresight. With the emission constraint, it means it shows quite ideal pathway. Decision makers and planners, social planners know all the future information, and then they trust the information 100%, and then it shows dynamic solution. And then, so major decisions take place in the later period, and more dynamic, not in the near period. That's the main feature of this kind of model. And also, we have plant level information and also dispatch decisions. So that means we have all gas power, coal power plants numbers in our model, and each level decommissioning is decided also in the model. And renewable, it has renewable energy cost of supply curves based on renewable potential. That means it has marginally increasing renewable supply cost. And so if we want to provide more renewable energy in solar and offshore wind, and cost increase in the model. And it has also aggregated time resolution. It's important in this kind of model to reduce computation burden. And also there's no transmission restriction in the model. It's the shortcoming of this model. And also, but renewable integration cost is included as a kind of variable cost terms in renewable generation. The data comes from OECD. And then this is 1 4-hour battery ESS. There's no other backstop technology, CCS or DAC. And then sector coupling is not considered. That's the thing you need to know. And I will explain that why that is important later. So there are many assumptions, and in the scenarios, the renewable technology cost assumption comes from one study. So many Korean researchers use numbers from NL ATB database, but that does not fit in Korean situation. So we use that number. It's a pity that we don't have our own projection numbers. I hope we have our own projection numbers in the future. And the parcel price assumption important. And then that comes from IEA. And high pure prices, each scenario, in the steps scenario, it means current, there is no global strong mitigation. And then we use fossil fuel. And then in the case price goes up. And then if we achieve in the net zero, everything goes well, and then fossil price will goes down because demand will decrease. That's the two important, assumption in my study. Domestic sector policy follow, existing power plant retirement and new plant operation follow our electricity sector plan. Also, nuclear policy. We assumed, also extension of all existing nuclear power plant. 2 new power plants will be added in the future, and that's quite also promising. I mean, also very positive assumption for the nuclear power plant, and domestic or renewable energy costs follow the KEI's report, and then especially nowadays offshore wind capex capital cost is very high in South Korea. That's the big problem, and that's why also this assumption and the current situation affect our result. And then we can think of many scenarios, but I consider 4 variables, and then there will be 16 cases, but I selected 5 cases. I'll explain them later. And then the BAU, I mean, it better be called a reference scenario. I mean, 70% in power sector reduction. That means 80% million ton of CO2 remains. And near net zero policy is near net zero, technically. I mean, 95% reduction and 10 million CO2 remains. We assume that because complete net zero is quite challenging in the power sector, and our model is not fully prepared to analyze the complete net zero in the system. That's why we chose that scenario. Renewable technology costs, high and low, there are 2 cases, and green hydrogen gas import. The high means current hydrogen price dropped to by 55%, but the low case is decreased by 70%. And fossil prices, I mean, high scenario follows, I mean, yeah, steps scenario in the IEA. I mean, low scenario follow the IEA net zero cases. And then high, there are 2 BAU cases. BAU high all means this moderate mitigation, and the high renewable costs are high because still government is not so active to reduce the renewable energy cost, and fossil price is high in the first scenario, and second scenario there's a low fossil prices because in that case global net zero is met, and then fossil fuel demand decrease, and that scenario represents that. And net zero scenario, there are 3 cases, and low renewable technology costs are assumed because government push a lot to expand renewables and cost will go down. And I assume different hydrogen prices and fossil prices. And the last one is, I mean, low technology cost and low hydrogen and low fossil price cases. That's the ideal cases. And then I will show you some results. And then in BAU scenario, coal and LNG is still used. And so when the fossil price is low, we use a lot of LNG in the second column. And the net zero scenario, still we use LNG. In many cases, the share is around, 8%, and then in the last scenario, still 18%. We use some fossil fuel. And then renewable, solar, wind, offshore, their share is more than, 50%. And in net zero, near net zero scenario, is about, near to 70%. In, net zero high fossil price cases, the hydrogen use is quite similar to our net zero scenario. Government net zero scenario, announced 2 years ago. Yeah. And still it shows, okay, solar is dominant renewable energy source in our analysis. And the capacity shows the 26 gigawatt nuclear remains. And solar PV in net zero scenario, their capacity reach above 500 gigawatt to 600 gigawatt in 2050. So onshore wind expand more, and offshore wind capacity is less than, around 40 to 50%, 50 gigawatt. As I mentioned, because the high capital cost of wind, offshore wind, it show less potential in our result. And hydrogen turbine is 30 to 50 gigawatt, and battery ESS is huge numbers, and more than, close to 200 gigawatt. And as I mentioned, there are also sector coupling is not included in analysis. If we use sector coupling technology, battery ESS demand will decrease. And the unit generation costs, it means the increase significantly in BAU in high parcel price cases. And I didn't mention that, but the electric demand is the same in two policy cases. So it reached the BAU means quite long electrification path. I mean, still use a lot of electricity, and decarbonization is failed. So we represent that to directly compare between BAU and net zero. And in net zero case, in the end, a price increase, but the maximum level was less than about 30% in 2050. In the best case was less than 20%. But it shows if we depend on more imported hydrogen fuel later, it will increase further. And carbon prices, in all cases, was less than 100,000 Korean won per ton of CO2. And interesting point was when parcel price rose, parcel price significantly affect the carbon prices in the power sector later in 2055, because when carbon price rose, and then there is no other option, the less option to mitigate in the sector, and carbon price should increase to 250,000 won in the future. And then fuel import costs. So in BAU cases, in all cases, increase a lot. I mean, it's almost double in the 2050, because we use a lot of electricity, and still we use fossil fuel. So that's the reason. And there are two different price cases in the BAU, but still, they increase fuel import costs a lot. But in net zero scenario, in all scenario, we benefit early in 2030, and then the fuel import cost is less than the base year 2020. I mean, 30 trillion euro. But if we import more hydrogen, the cost, import cost will increase in the end. So I will. This is my last slide. So our study shows, okay, we can achieve near net zero system in South Korea, but mainly our model shows solar and battery ESS as the main technological portfolio, and offshore wind and other technology could be, more adapted, but technology learning should take place more quickly. So in the net zero scenario, the unit cost increased until 2050, but change less than 30%. Compared to the base year. So BAU scenario, if we depend on fossil fuel, and then long electrification cases, our fuel import cost, also net zero unit cost will increase more than net zero. But in this analysis, renewable subsidies and real transmission costs, other social costs are not included in the analysis. And only it includes pure technical cost. So last point is net zero transition is likely bring more benefit for South Korea, and because we pay less for fuel import, and then it will boost the local jobs and local industry. And then if we use fossil fuel with high electric demand, it's a bad case in the future, could make our economy more vulnerable to volatile fossil prices. So also in the race to the global net zero. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. We have now reached the final segment of the event, the discussion and Q&A session for session 3. And for designated discussion, let me invite Dr. In Hwan Go to the screen again Dr. Go, you can start now.
Thank you very much. I will make the designated discussion very short as I feel the lunch has been delayed a lot and then I feel pressured to be the last designated discussion, so I'll make it very quick. Thank you for all the presentations. I think those two research projects really speak to each other. So I will have a discussion for all of you, and especially I would like to ask, maybe if I have time, Dr. James Hyung-Kwon Kim, in terms of the transmission implications of these scenarios when we have to include more renewable energy than before. So first of all, I would like to briefly provide a summary of the presentation by Kim and Professor Hong. And then, first of all, thank you very much for the presentation and congratulations on working with Professor Hong, who's been an established scholar, but also the mentor for all the young professionals working in the climate change field in Korea. So basically, the presentation is about comparing between the NEACGE and the Message 6 model. And then the presentation says that the research has been completing the calibration and also the baseline scenario base year of 2019 for NEACGE, and then the Message 9R71 prototype was also complete. And then Dr. Che's presentation was about assessing the impact of decarbonizing electricity on generation costs and fuel imports under 16 scenarios, and then only showing the 5 scenarios. And then I had the question, why choosing the 5 scenarios? And then Dr. Che, you have answered my question for the clarity issues. The upshot is that net zero scenarios, NZ scenarios, have lower generation costs than BAU, high all, which means the fuel costs remain high, but still higher than BAU, low fossil, which means the fossil costs are remaining low, perhaps due to the ESS uptake. And then that means fuel imports to fill in the hydrogen for that ESS. And then NZ scenarios have the lowest fuel cost than all BAU scenarios, yet dependence on hydrogen and fossil fuel will offset such lowering trends. I have some clarifying questions, but I think I will want to focus on the second one, which is basically what's also presented in the presentation, the simulation approach versus optimization approach. So what I understand is the simulation approach will have the parameters, economic indicators, society, biosphere, atmosphere parameters, and then update as the simulation timeline goes year by year. And then the optimization, on the other hand, will have different budgets depending on the scenario, such as BAU and 1.5 and 2 Celsius degree, and then choose the right mix of energy technologies and primary energy mix to meet the lowest cost possible to meet those budgets. So what would be the main intervention in this case for the GCE that should be varying across the scenarios? I couldn't see some of the differences that you might have in the later phase of this research to have different scenarios across different scenarios in the GCE, and then with the main intervention that differs or varies these scenarios be some more stringent carbon tax, some more stringent ETS, etc. So I was curious about that. What your thoughts on to establish the scenarios and what should differ across those scenarios? And then the last question was just basically about what the new regions and new trading configuration mean in R17 in the message model. And for Dr. Che, I had also 3 questions. The first one, I think it's answered properly. And the second one was especially the onshore and offshore wind. What are some of the assumptions that you had for the wind so that the scenario indicates that it should be mainly solar and ESS rather than the wind? And you potentially talked about the expansion of offshore wind, but I was wondering what the assumptions were for that onshore and offshore wind energy. And the third question, maybe it's about the dispatch assumption. So in NZ scenarios, the solar should take almost over 70% of the total electricity production. So would it still be working as a base load, or should nuclear and LNG remaining still be responsible for that? So that was my assumptions, questions. And the discussion questions, I will just lay out here all at once. And then maybe I will go from the base rate implications for Dr. Che. What implications under NZ scenarios does the unit generation cost increase? Because we will have the generation cost increase even in the NZ scenario compared to the VEU low fossil scenario. What are some of those implications that the unit generation cost increase have on utilities base rates and electricity bills? So base rates, I'm talking about the burdens or some implications that the producers might have. And when it comes to electricity bills, it's talking about the implications for the customers. And then what I'm more interested in actually, for the interest of time, is about the transmission systems, because I was thinking about my comments to these presentations, and then while I was listening to Dr. James Hyungwon Kim's presentation, this really made me ask more, as opposed to the current Korean transmission systems and electricity system writ large, what modifications should there be to fully utilize solar and ESS expansion? So this is, I assume, may not be something that's commensurable or compatible to your existing models, for maybe both for Kim and Professor Hong's research and Dr. Chay's research, but because it entails a lot, when we look at, recall Dr. James Kim's research, the increased expansion of wind energy capacity in the ERCOT and the inland near Midwest region. There we observed a lot of negative prices for the electricity, wholesale prices for electricity, which might still not affect their ability, the utilities' ability to recover their costs, but maybe that has some implications for the future transmission systems in Korea, should we have more solar and ESS expansion. And then some of the discussions I want to add, which will be my final point, is that are there some policy solutions that we can think of to both have expanded solar and ESS capacity and stabilizing the transmission system, so that we don't have to incur a lot of investment costs on new transmission system. One of the things that I thought was, well, we have in US context, we have base rates where the utilities are guaranteed to recover when they propose the project, because it's such a long term. And then what if there are any policy solutions that for wind or solar renewable energy facilities to include storage system in their internal portfolio? And in that case, maybe we can incentivize such proposals that can mitigate burdens on the transmission system with higher rate of return when we first account for the base loads in the initial phase. So those are some of the questions that I had, and I really want to say again, thank you for accommodating this hybrid session to KDI school and relevant staffs, experts, and also thank you very much for the interpreters doing the dual interpretation, Korean and English. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Go. Please wait for a moment while we prepare for the stage. Dr. Go, we are all set. You can start the session.
Okay, I'm saying them well. Thank you very much. So why don't we entertain the presenters of this session to first respond to any comments they have, or raise any points of discussion to the floor, and then when we have those responses, open the Q&A to the participants in the floor.
Yeah, okay, then I will post the answers, the comments, and thank you for the Inan. So I think it is very difficult to prepare the discussions because for my research now is ongoing research, and most of the relate to the details and techniques informations. But yeah, for answer the comment, so the comments, the third one, so it means new reasons. Yeah. In the messaging models, originally we based on the base model, the which is it has 11 reasons. So it divides world by 11 reasons, but we split reasons. The focus on the Northeast Asia. So for example, there is some reasons. The CPA means Central Planet Asia, so it includes China and Cambodia and Vietnam. But in my research, so I explicitly extracted the China from the CPA. So it means the new reasons. And for the new trading configurations means, so in the baseline model, in message models, they didn't consider or account the LNG imports for the PAS reasons, which is Korea has and Korea and mixed up the Korea and Southeast Asia. So I introduced new historical LNG imports activities and also updated the pipeline gases historical activities. And the comment, the number 2, so the interventions, yeah, so I think for the policy implications, so we need more refine the baseline or reference scenarios. But in my research, now it's ongoing research, so I didn't consider any implementing some policies, some related to the energy efficiencies or some ETS. So maybe in the future we need more refine the baseline scenarios, also consider the national policies for each reasons. So, and after that, we can start to produce the policy implications. And for the comment number 1, the authors, the expectations of the differences in the research. So, and also include the last comment. So I think we are trying to the modeling comparisons between the using the 2 different types models. So one model is top-down approach, so it can depict and capture the economic impacts. And the other models can capture the technology-specific changes. So using both these scenarios and models, so maybe we can more reach implications of the future of the NEA reason to the net zero targets. Yep. So yeah. So that is my comments.
Thank you very much.
I received many questions. I think roughly I received 5 questions. First thing is about scenario. Yeah, I considered many 4 variables: policy and renewable technology cost, hydrogen and fossil fuel. I consider they are quite most important factors in my study. And I mean, showing all scenario is quite also puzzling. I mean, how to interpret. So I selected 5 interesting scenarios, which are most interesting to me, and that's why I chosen. And then in the paper later, I will publish. In the future, I will show all the 16 scenario results, and then why. Among them, I will show the 5 scenario results. And about solar, wind, and hydrogen, and these assumptions, I did mention about the potential, renewable potential in our South Korea, but in my analysis, I mean, potentials are open, but this, as installation capacity increase in our model, the cost also marginally increase. And I mean, also the potential numbers, I mean, market potential numbers are based on Korean renewable agencies numbers. And then the interesting point is, I mean, in all cost, I mean, projection, I mean, in all technology, solar, wind, and offshore wind, onshore wind, and hydrogen, and battery ESS, the model chose mainly solar and battery ESS. I mean, hydrogen fuel in hydrogen turbine was less than expected, but because we assumed, I mean, not pure net zero scenario, still we use LNG and nuclear power. That's why the hydrogen use was much less than in other studies. But these are pure cost-based optimization result. And about nuclear and LNG, a role of their technologies in this base load, of course, they are important to keep the electric system reliable. And yes, but so I mean, the interesting point is how to decarbonize the last 5%. And personally, I mean, we in the future we will look at how LNG, CCS, I mean, other, what if the dark technology, how these are more, I mean these backstop technology options, and we will see how they will operate as a base load, and those are missing. But in terms of, I mean, electric system, I mean, reliability, I mean, these base load technology, I mean, dispatchable technology are very important, yes. And about electricity bill, how these costs will reflect in the electric bill. As I mentioned, is in Korea, the RPS, the REC price, and also ETS certificate price will be transferred to the electric bill, and these are not also included in our result. So our scenario, I mean, result, I mean, 30% increase in 2050 shows the best projection. So when, I mean, all the indirect costs decrease a lot in South Korea. I mean, also the solar panel price dropped by 70% in 2050. The best case is 30%. I mean, worst case will increase further. Yes. And the last question was transmission cost. So yes, it will cost a lot, and then we indirectly accounted for also transmission cost. But also the problem is the demand, most electric demand concentrated in Seoul and Gyeonggi and Incheon area. So we have to transport all the electricity from, I mean, Gangwon and also Gyeongnam to Seoul. That's the problem. And so we have to, already South Korea has announced a policy. We're going to move the electric demand to the Jeonnam and other area which has high renewable energy potential. And then generation and demand should move together. And then regional distribution and generation and consumption will reduce the transmission costs. Yeah, that's the answer.
Thank you very much. I was also looking forward to that Energy Bunsan법, the energy decentralized law. Are there, for the interest of time, I think we can invite 2 more participants to have questions from the floor.
Yep. So as a previous presenter, but however, I got a question from the discussion, so I feel obliged to answer at least briefly. So it's gonna be threefold. So one is the modeling perspective, and the second one is the U.S. perspective, and I'll bring it to the Korean one. So the modeling wise, of course, if you assuming there is no transmission line constraint, everything looks perfect, and the cost will go down. So if you add one more constraint, of course, again, the price will go up and the cost will go up. Why it has not been happening more commonly? Because it's damn hard. The spatial distribution and the transmission line topology, and also if you have a spatial granularity, then you also need to input a lot of the parameters and resources and data. So it has not been commonly happen. However, it should happen. Why? Because even though the transmission line will increase the technological cost in terms of the overall investment when you include the transmission line congestion, it will decrease the market cost, meaning the transmission line topology, especially the constraint, the transmission line, is the culprit to increase the electricity market prices, even though there are a lot of abundant marginal cost, almost net zero, the marginal cost of renewable assets in the grid, because those clean and cheap energy is not transported to the other areas. So it will likely to increase the cost for those load pockets like big cities, and they are the consumers with the higher prices they need to pay. So it will go down to the market cost, overall social cost. And you briefly asked the transmission line base rate and how those are recouped or reinvested. So twofold. One is, yes, the transmission line rate is too technical, so I'll not really go deep into that. However, the base rate is recouped by the cost plus, meaning like they have a designated kind of like a secured return every year for the transmission line investment, but the investment is not currently happening with two reasons. One is too expensive. The second one is really hard to overcome those social barriers, so to speak. And the most of the costs, if you analyze those costs, then many of them is a soft cost. So meaning there are a lot of regulatory red tapes and also the overcoming the community rebel for those things. So that's why recently Department of Energy, in collaboration with the FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which recognized the 20 years of non-committed transmission lines in the U.S. And the most of the culprit is that there is an interstate on transmission line. There is no central organization or central authority to actually overrule those different opinions over those sides. So if you come down to the soft coast, then the transmission line will be more built with a less cost of many of them from the soft coast. And how to recoup their investment, there are two ways. One is a base rate, which is really hard to change because that's commonly applied to many of the infrastructure in the US. But the second one is the financial transmission right, meaning there's a financial transmission right scheme to reimburse to the transmission line owners with the financial transmission line markets. So if we reform those markets financially rather than touching the fundamental transmission line or the infrastructure, the cost plus rate-based return, I think that's easier. So what does that mean in the Korean situation? It's hard. It's really hard, and that's one of the common questions that I got from the Hanjung Capco people and like all the other people. But just I want to mention a few things. If also the transmission line is really hard to build, it's not because it's hard to build, like by technological perspective. It's also like a community opinion collecting, and also there are a lot of social repelling for that one. So if we can go through those ones, that's better. But this is too formal. So as Dr. Che mentioned, there is a demand and resource generation mismatch in Korea. So for example, there are a lot of data centers in the Seoul area, and there are a lot of like renewable energy generation in the South area. Why? Because there is no price signal. Because the price in Korea is unilateral. So even though you build the data centers near Seoul, there is no disadvantage by building. If you're happening that in like US, for example, if you want to build the data centers right next to San Francisco, then you need to bear the electricity price 100 times higher than the other areas. So meaning if the Korea, at least regional or zonal level, having a differentiated prices, so meaning Seoul has a higher price, $100, for example, and the southern part of the Korea has $10 of the energy price, then you will not build energy centers near the Seoul. You will build energy centers in the south part of the Korea where energy price is cheap and there are a lot of clean energies is there. So the transmission line should be happening because of the imbalance of the demand and the supply. However, it is not because there's a transmission line lag, but if there is regional different prices like in the US and giving enough price signal, then the reimbalance will be balanced out by itself because of the price signal. So the necessary of the transmission line, of course, it should be built. However, its dire situation will be reduced by the price signal if Korea just reform the market design of the electricity market. So I think that's it.
Thank you very much. Are there any other presenters? Just one more participant who wants to ask questions to the presenters?
I guess we're ready to wrap up.
Okay, that sounds good. So thank you very much Dr. James Kim mentioned the soft calls that I study solar and renewable energy opposition, so that is something that we can think of in the future opportunities. With that said, thank you for the presenters of this session today, and then I hope you enjoy a great exchange, networking, and lunch after this session. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much. This concludes the 2023 Korea-U.S. Policy Dialogue towards Carbon Neutrality. On behalf of KDI School, I would like to thank you all for your attention and participation over the past 2 days. We hope this dialogue have renewed everyone's interest in the topic, and further hope that this will help promote an exchange between the two countries, exchange of policy ideas between the two countries, as well as academia and the public sector. Thank you all very, very much.